Sometimes in life, you have to start over, and it's not always on your own terms or on your own timeline. So, what do you do with that? How do you figure that out? This is something that in rereading This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan, because I've read it several times, but recently I've been rereading it, and this is a theme that keeps coming up. So, let's talk about it. Hey there, I'm Kathleen. Welcome to my channel. I'm a writer, founder, and storyteller. And if you want to check out some of my writing, you can visit my Substack, one shift at a time, where I talk about building a life and work aligned with your values with more ease and less chaos through identity shifts and transitions. The link to check that out is in the description, and you can join the newsletter or become a member. Now, like I said, this video, it's inspired by This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. So if you haven't read the book or the other books in the Skyland series, go on ahead and put this video on pause, add it to your watch later, and then come on back because there's going to be a few spoilers and we're going to talk openly and freely about the book and the series. So I've reread all three books in the Skyland series. Before I Let Go, This Could Be Us, and Can't Get Enough. I have read and reread all three several times. I would say that of the three, I like the story in Before I Let Go the most. I like the romance in This Could Be Us the best. And then my favorite of the three women is Hendrix, because I see myself, like I relate to her more as being, unmarried and child-free. I really relate to Hendrix. But in This Could Be Us, obviously, like I talk a lot about navigating life's transitions and identity shifts with more ease and less chaos. While all three of the women are going through their own shifts and transitions, there's something about Soledad's story where, in rebuilding her life after finding out that her husband of what, like 20 years, he has been embezzling money from his job, close to $6 million. She got an STI from him. And then on top of all that, he got his assistant pregnant. And ultimately, once he was released from prison, they run off. I forgot where they ran off to, but they run off together, the three of them living their life. And so Soledad didn't see any of that coming. And she had to learn how to rebuild her life on her own, which she, in realizing and getting to know herself again and self-partnering, she had realized that she, kind of forgot who she really was because she had been attached or partnered to Edward, partnered, attached to him for more, like almost half of her life, maybe just about half of her life, because I think she's either 40 or in her early 40s at the start of the book. And so it's like really interesting to read a book about a woman in her 40s who is starting over and rebuilding. Because I think it sends a really good message that, first of all, life does not end, especially for women. Life doesn't end at 30 or 35 or 40 or even older than that. There's opportunities to rebuild. And with Soledad, her life, the transitions and the shifts that she's making and getting to know herself again, it wasn't on her own timeline. When the FBI pulled up to their house, that's the first part of the book where my mouth dropped. There were several parts of this book where I was like, Kennedy, girl, I thought this was a romance. But the first half of the book, it's like it's a thriller. It's a psychological thriller. Um, and so when the FBI pulls up to Soledad and Edward's house and it's the FBI raid, they're literally having dinner. I think that was the dinner where she said to herself, like, oh, she cooked a perfect steak and dinner looked really, really good and all of that. And then the doorbell rings, you answer the door, and it's the FBI. And she's just like, what is going on? And there was a part of the book where she made a decision that she wanted to stay in the home that like she and Edward together had built and created. Because it was more than just the house. It was the home that she built for her family. And despite the fact that she had no idea how she was going to be able to sustain it because she did not work outside of the home, she was like, I want to keep my home. And in making that decision, that was her saying, like, I'm gonna figure this out. And she even said to Edward when he was like, oh, you're not gonna be able to do this without me, or you're not gonna be able to figure it out. And she was like, watch me. She already knew that she could. And though I think there was a part of her that felt like she had something to prove, not to Edward, but to herself. Deep down, she knew that she would be able to figure it out. And just her whole journey was her realizing like what she's really made of that she may have forgotten when her identity was so tied to being married to Edward. Now, even though I have read this book multiple times, I don't actually think I've ever really looked at the discussion questions at the end of the book until the most recent reread. And so one of the discussion questions is like part of what prompted this video. And it's question 5 that says, once everything is revealed about Edward's embezzlement scheme, Soledad has to figure out a new path for herself and her girls, including how she'll leverage her skills to earn a living. Have you ever had to make a major life pivot? If so, how did you handle having to call on new skills or chart new territory? So that question really spoke to me because that's essentially like my story from the past couple of years. So over the past 10 years, I've been through a lot of different life, career, and just general transitions and changes and stuff. For the record, my son is in Taurus and Uranus was in Taurus, and there was a lot going on. So I don't believe in coincidences. And I'm just saying, you know, all that to say, when I saw that question, that's what prompted this video to talk about, how do you navigate unexpected life changes or these changes and transitions that have to happen because something has happened that has shaken your foundation or your identity or something like that. And so I'm about 2 years removed from corporate and traditional 9 to 5 jobs. And after almost 15 years of being in that workspace. And during those 15 years, I had experienced 4 periods of unemployment, and those 4 periods were in a time-year time frame. And two of those unemployment periods were my choice, and two were not. And so the most recent one was about 2 years ago. In my opinion, I was pushed out unfairly of that company because of internal politics. Let them tell it, they'll say it's a performance thing, but we know that a lot of PIPs, performance improvement plans, are never really about the work. I think I've read a stat that said like 80% of PIPs are predatory, and it's essentially like the company trying to cover itself to not get sued, all that. All that to say is, even though when I was at that job, I had an exit strategy. Like that job, that environment, it was very low vibrational. And I was there as long as I was because I was trying to figure out my next step. And so I already was working on my exit plan. It was already like in motion. I really only needed about 3 or 4 more months from the time that I was pushed out, like terminated. There were like, I only would have needed another 3 months to completely execute my plan. But when I was placed on a PIP and eventually terminated, it wasn't on my timeline. So essentially, like, and maybe that's why rereading This Could Be Us, even though, like I said, I relate most to Hendrix, but I think because Soledad, she's figuring out her life and it's because of choices that somebody else made. So I think like in reading that, I saw similarities in my own life where I have been rebuilding and returning to myself, figuring things out based on choices that somebody else made. And it's difficult because when it's on your own terms, like I just said, like if it, all I needed was another like 3 to 4 months and I would have left that company on my own terms, following my plan. And I know when, you make plans, God laughs. But when it wasn't on my timeline, it was very challenging. And then the added challenge, similar to Soledad, who, she's getting to know herself and she has 3 girls to also think about and provide for. And like I am really only like obligated to myself because I'm child free. But so similarly, trying to figure things out based on a choice somebody else made and a choice that you did not see coming. When I was placed on a PIP, I didn't see it coming. I had a feeling that like during the performance review cycle, I had a feeling that there was going to be something that would give me a side eye, like, but I did not expect what actually happened. I like that in the book, there is a jump, 8 months, I think, from when we first like find out all these things about Edward and him getting arrested and all these things, and Soledad deciding that she is going to figure it out without him because she doesn't really have a choice. Well, no, she does have a choice, and she chose that she wants to be able to keep her home and be there with her girls and figure it out. And so when we jump 8 months, I like that there was that jump because in my own story, like I do talk a lot about 4 periods of unemployment and, being pushed out of a job and that, being pushed out in the way that I was pushed out was pretty traumatic and it changed my brain chemistry. But then I would like if I were to tell a story in the same way as Soledad's story, I too would probably skip about 8 to 10 months and pick up from there. Because those 8 months that we don't hear about in Soledad's story, I can only imagine that she's, figuring out or really grieving the relationship, the life she thought she would have. Like I said, I know for me, I grieved the money that I had and how I had planned to use it. I grieved like where I thought I would be at this point. Um, so I can understand that. And like right, like that phase of a life shift or rebuilding after a life pivot that wasn't on your terms or timeline. It's I wouldn't say it doesn't read well. A lot of the months immediately after I lost that job, there was a part of me that was like, well, maybe if I had done this, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And it was kind of me like romanticizing the past because, like I said, I was working on my own exit plan and just needed a few more months. So it's not like it was a job that I loved. It's not a job that I was trying to be at that much longer. So it was like my brain was trying to re romanticize the past and make it seem like it was something that it wasn't. And so those first few months after that catalyst or whatever forces you to make a life change, those first few months are just you trying to make sense of what happened. I know I asked like why it happened or like well, I kept saying like what was the reason? Like what was the purpose? And kept trying to find purpose in it. And then I eventually got to a point where I like surrendered control and stopped trying to figure out what was the purpose and have just like learned to trust myself and trust God that everything works together. And so what I did with that, I started my business. And I've already like kind of pivoted some things in my business itself, and I'm leaning more towards, building a brand that's based on living a life with more ease and less chaos, even through life's pivots and identity shifts and through life's challenges, because life is always going to life, but we can find ease, we can choose ease even through that. I hope that my story also inspires people, inspires women, especially. A lot of us were pushed out of the workforce over the past couple of years, and a lot of us were forced to figure it out. And it wasn't on our own terms or our own timeline, but ultimately, we're going to figure it out. And if somebody ever says to you, like, you're not going to be able to figure it out without them or without this or that or a certain system or, a certain way of doing things, be like Soledad and say, watch me.